This is It Matters, the show that digs beneath the surface of our political landscape, pop culture, and the 2024 election. I'm your host, Michael Starr Hopkins. I'm a born and bred Washingtonian who knows the ins and outs of DC. I've worked with political heavyweights from presidents to governors and members of Congress. I also write for and appear on The Hill, The Daily Beast, MSNBC, and News Nation. Now I'm bringing you prominent politicians and cultural icons, and the unfiltered truth. So buckle up and join me as we navigate this crazy world together and look at the situations that matter the most. This is It Matters. Let's dive in. And welcome to the show, Kurt Bardella, News Nation contributor, Democratic strategist, political consultant extraordinaire. How you doing, man?
Hey, doing great, brother. How about you?
I'm good. Thanks so much for joining us. How you been? What's been new?
Man, I'm a little sleep deprived. It's been a busy couple of weeks between both of my different worlds of country music and politics. I just got back from Texas, Frisco, Texas, where the Academy of Country Music Awards were, and I saw
Kelsey Ballerini's performance.
Yeah, well, the big one that was surprising was Chris Stapleton and Dua Lipa, which was awesome, I got to say. She sounds amazing live.
I saw Chris Stapleton. My wife and I saw Chris Stapleton at Farnborough, which was a concert in New York that happened one time on Governor's Island. And we saw Chris Stapleton in a tent with about 50 other people.
Oh, wow.
I was like 5 feet from him. And it was like right before he won all those Grammys and blew up.
Yeah. Yep. Yeah, it was. I mean, that guy's got some soul in him.
He's so talented. He's so unbelievably talented. He's like old school. Like, you just want to listen to him sing the phone book.
Yeah. I could listen to him sing anything. So it was that was a fun night, but it was one of those nights where, in my mind, like, all right, we're gonna get home by 11.
Never happened.
Dude, I got home. It was like 2:30 in the morning. I was just like, oh my God. Like it takes me like 3 days to recover from this stuff now.
I mean, because you're out here hanging out with country music's biggest stars. Like, you know.
I gotta tell you, I had one of those what is my life moments that night. I was at one, like, just, hanging out after party thing. No big deal. It's pretty low key. And in the middle of it, a buddy of mine just kind of pulls me aside and says, walk outside in exactly 5 minutes and hop in the car. Like, okay.
That sure. Sounds like how you get kidnapped.
It sounds like the start of a Liam Neeson movie. But we did that and ended up going to this spot about 2 miles away in Plano, Texas. And it ended up being the Jelly Roll Post Malone after party. And again, it was in this dive bar. There's like, maybe 70 people there. And all of a sudden it's like, you see, Jelly's there, getting things set up. Then Post comes in. Then Brothers Osborne come in. Then Kelsey Ballerini comes
Brothers
in.
Brothers Osborne, Deal Maryland, stand up.
There you go. Yep. Then Dan and Shay come in. And it's just like, and I'm kind of like, I don't think I'm supposed to be at this party, honestly, because I'm definitely not important, high profile, or cool enough to be there. But it was, and hence instead of going home at 11, going home at 2:30.
I mean, that's a good excuse. I gotta say, so as a black country music fan, which until recently wasn't a cool thing, I gotta know, how's an Asian dude become a country music fan?
Yeah, I'm like the only Asian that these guys are ever. It makes me memorable. I'll say that.
Absolutely.
It was such a random thing. It was back in 2010 where a friend of mine who was a coworker at the time on Capitol Hill just had an extra ticket to a concert and was just like, hey, like, my friend bailed at the last second. Like, are you up to anything? Like, actually, no, like, I'd love to go. Sure. Like, live music, the country's not really my thing, but it'll be fun. And it was a Jason Aldean Eric Church concert. And it was awesome. It was just like a giant rock show, basically. I was like, oh, you know what?
Aldean's not my cup of tea. He's an asshole, but I love his music. He puts on a hell of a show. Same with Eric Church. Eric Church puts on an awesome show.
Him and Brittany were at the show at the party too. Now I think of it, but I'm saying it's like, this is where I have to divorce my personal political feelings versus just appreciating their talent and their ability to perform. Which obviously, no matter
which in this landscape is, we've got to do that every day with the Diddy stuff that's going on with, like,
oh my God, right?
Yeah, the dynamics of everything. It's like trying to divorce what you think of their music with what you think of
You would have loved this event that I went to 2 days before the ACMs. They hosted for the first time ever in partnership with Amazon and MGM Studios this Charlie Pride diversity in country music brunch.
Yeah.
Where his widow and his son were there. It was hosted by one of my personal favorite country music artists, Breland, who I think is freaking amazing.
For sure.
And honored a number of just trailblazers in this industry. And it was the greatest feeling in that room as you looked around and you literally saw all people of color. And it's the only event where, frankly, white people were the minority.
Yeah.
And it was the first year that they did that, and I hope they do it every year because it was just a really empowering feeling seeing how many people who are part of the industry side of country music are actually part, communities of color.
Shout out to Mickey Guyton. She's done some amazing work in speaking up and speaking out and talking about diversity in country music. So shout out to her. I've always been a really big fan of hers.
Yeah, I mean, that's one of the great things, too, I got to say about, for all the conversation about Beyonce and whether, people like her in country music or not. I appreciated that she handpicked certain up-and-coming artists, women of color, who you may not have heard of or may not follow, but artists like Brittany Spencer or Tanner Adele to sing background on some of those tracks. Shabuzi, again, anything that draws more eyeballs, in my opinion, is a good thing. If you happen to come across a Cody Johnson song because you were listening to Beyonce and it just kind of started rolling out, I think that's a good thing personally. Yeah,
which. Cody Johnson, Human, another great song. Really big fan of his. Taking a pivot, politics. How did you get into politics, and how did you end up with Darrell Issa?
So it was really it started when I was a junior in high school in Escondido, which is just right outside of San Diego, California, and I was asked to be a part of this kind of student commission. And there were a lot of those that were popping up right after Columbine, where schools were looking for ways to give students, I think, kind of just a voice on some of the stuff that was happening in our society. And so at that, we got to go to a city council meeting, which at the time we were like, oh, that's so cool. Right now, that'd be considered punishment, I think. But at that council meeting, the mayor at the time was in this massive political fight with another council member. And they were just, she banged her gavel 60 times during that meeting.
It's like a House oversight meeting.
It was crazy. They were. It ended up with a censure resolution against the guy. But at the end of it, they had this public comment period where I just kind of went down there as my school rep and just lambast. I'm like, you guys are embarrassing. You have a room full of high school students here, and this is the example you're setting. And the next
That's pretty much what you say to me on TV.
Yeah, pretty much. And it ended up being on the front page of the San Diego Union Tribune the next day. And with my picture and all of that. And that was kind of my first brush with politics and media. And then shortly after I graduated high school that summer, a state lawmaker happened to host a fundraiser at a restaurant I was working at. I started talking with the chief of staff, who I didn't know was the chief of staff. I just, thought was just some guy. But he ended up offering me an internship. I took the internship, and about 2 weeks later, they offered me an actual job. So at the time, because my birthday's in late October, I was a minor. I was 17, but I had a full-time job in the state legislature of California. Did that for 2 years, then went to a CBS affiliate in Bakersfield, California, KBAK, Channel 29, Eyewitness News, to kind of do the media side of things. Did that for 2 years, which was a great time in California. It was 2003, the recall of Gray Davis, the campaign of Arnold Schwarzenegger to become governor. So it was a really interesting time to be involved in media in California at that time. And then got on the congressional campaign. The congressman from San Diego, Randy Duke Cunningham, went down for bribery, and one of the most infamous bribery cases in congressional history.
There are a lot of those in California these days.
Launched a special election campaign. There were a dozen candidates, 4 self-funding multimillionaires. My guy happened to win barely. By less than 100 votes on that primary. Wow. We won the election, and the next day, Congressman called me up, just said, "Hey kid, you want to come to Washington and be my press secretary?" And I thought, yeah, sure. I don't know what that means, but yeah, I'll do it. Just a kid, no college education of any kind, but yeah, let's go. my roommate when I moved to DC was Darrell Issa's press secretary, a great guy named Fred Hill. And, our congressional district literally neighbored Darrell's congressional district. Our office was literally next door to Darrell's in the Cannon House office building at the time. So we just became really close, and I became very embedded in Darrell Issa land just because we were literally neighbors. Mm-hmm. And so when he became the oversight committee top Republican and they needed to expand their press shop, they asked like, hey, like, you'd be a good fit. Darrell likes you. You know San Diego. You also know DC. Like, why don't we do this? And I thought, yeah, I'd work with my roommate and all my friends. Like, it sounds like a blast. We'll have a great time. Let's do it. So that's how I got to Darrell Issa land.
What was it like working on the Hill?
It was a lot of fun
for people who aren't like Washingtonian Hill insiders. Like, they don't really know Hill culture. It was,
and it's so different than now. I have to say, back then it was a lot of fun. Capitol Hill is just like a college campus.
Yeah.
Literally we have
work hard, party hard.
Yeah. It's like, and it was a time where no matter what side of the aisle you were on, you could still all be friends. I mean, we had softball games where we had Democrats and Republican staffers on, and everyone's kind of in on the joke because you all get everyone deals with the same challenges of their boss. Their boss comes up with a dumbass idea, which is like 90% of the ideas that members of Congress come up with. And the staff have to work behind the scenes to go like, hey, my boss is going to ask to sign on to your bill. Don't let that happen. It will kill the bill. Like, okay, I got you. We will tell him we're not quite ready for co-sponsors yet. There was a lot of collaboration and a lot of friendship because there was a genuine belief that no matter which side of the aisle you were on, that you were all there for the right reason and that you all respected the institution. And back then, the crazy outliers, they were the outliers. People like a Jim Jordan, people like a Marsha Blackburn or a Louis Gohmert or a Steve King. They were not the norm. They were the exception. And everybody collectively were like, those guys are nuts. Let's just stay away from them. Versus now, where they're running the place. You're like, what the fuck happened to Capitol Hill, where the people that we used to actively mock and make fun of, both parties, are now running the show? Like, it's a horrible place to work now. You talk to anyone who's there who happened to be there during what we call the good old days. They're like, God, it's depressing because you can't be friends with these people. You can't be friends with someone who works for someone like a Marjorie Taylor Greene because it's become that personal.
Yeah, when I walk around the Hill and walk into bars, it's depressing to see people sitting there now. Like, it's not like the fun, jovial, like, it's
the other week during one of the White House Correspondents' parties, I walk in and I'm talking to this reporter who's like, oh my God, like, Jim Jordan's press secretary saw you come into the party, and I was talking to him and he said, I fucking hate Kurt Bardella. And I'm just like, who the fuck this guy is? Like, who is this kid? Like, really?
Yeah.
Like, grow up. Like, what is wrong with you, man? So whoever you are, Jim Jordan's press secretary, I don't know who you are. I got nothing to say. I'm sorry.
I got a great Jim Jordan. So I was in a green room one time at Fox, and it was Jim Jordan and Matt Gaetz. And I can tell the story because it wasn't anything too crazy. There's a kind of a green room rule. You don't really,
doing below off a hooker. No, I'm kidding.
Yeah, right. There's the old
Matt Gaetz, maybe.
Underage hooker. So I'm in this green room, and it's like while the Hillary Benghazi stuff's going on, and Matt Gaetz and Jim Jordan are like watching the TV intently, and like I'm getting ready to go on Tucker, which is this is like in the early days of Tucker, and Jim Jordan's like, "Hey man, what you gonna talk about?" And I'm like, "I'm gonna talk about Hillary 2020, blah blah blah." And he's like, you just gotta keep the eye of the tiger. And I was like, what the hell does that mean? And Matt Gaetz kind of like looks at me and he's like, and I'm like, I have no idea. And he's like, the eye of the tiger, man. And so they like go on set, do their like ridiculous kind of, Dumb and Dumber interview together, come off set. And Jordan just like walks up to me and grabs my hand and like shakes it. It's like, eye of the tiger, and walks back out the room. And I was like, what the fuck just happened? They're weird. Like, who's the weirdest Republican you've had to deal with? Who's the weirdest?
Boy,
because there's some weird ones.
Let's see. I think. Oh God, there's such a range of personalities and characters. It really is sometimes like a sitcom. Now it would be a very dark sitcom, but there were the guys like, I always thought that former congressman, former oversight committee chairman back in that, Dan Burton was an odd duck. That guy was a weird guy.
I've never met him. I did a segment with Bolton one time on Fox, and it was like we had to switch, and I had to act like I was a Republican, and he had to act like he was a Democrat. And I was like blatantly mocking him in his face, and he didn't understand that I was mocking him in his face.
Nope, he thought it was a tribute.
I actually I think he thought I was like honoring him, and I was like, making fun of him in the Iraq War. And like 2 days later, he ended up leaving to go to the White House, and I once again was just like, what the fuck is going on with my life?
Yeah, Dan Burton was an odd duck. And it's interesting because some of the people that you think might be the biggest assholes are actually behind the scenes the nicest.
Ooh, like who?
People would ask a lot about Darrell, frankly, because he had this reputation of being this badass, oversight guy. That guy
he had a run. He had a strong run.
He was the best boss I ever had on Capitol Hill by far.
Wow.
This guy treated his staff with so much respect, so much kindness. There's a reason why he had very little turnover, which is the sign. Like if you're looking at an office, you want to know who sucks. Look at how much turnover they have.
100%. That's public. You can go look.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah,
those are public numbers.
Darrell had pretty much the same nucleus of staff for almost his entire congressional career. To this day, his current chief of staff started with him. At least, God, it's 2023, so probably 15 years ago. It's like this guy had, he had a great eye for talent. I mean, obviously, and clearly, but just had a great staff, and the staff all got along behind closed doors. It was a great environment.
What was it like being an Asian Republican? The dynamic has got to be interesting.
I never thought about it that much back then because, again, as a Republican, you know what we don't sit around talking about? Diversity, race, anything. You just treat everybody like they're white because they are. And so I just, it's I think in my own mind, my own identity, I'm like, oh, I'm basically a white person because that's kind of what it feels like.
Yeah.
So it just never really crossed my mind all that much. Because you just have that feeling of anytime you interact with people, oh, you're one of the good ones, and so
I say all the time, the line's shorter on the other side. When you got these black Republicans, I'm more afraid of the Tim Scott black Republicans who I don't even think are in on the joke. Byron Donald is in on the joke. He knows what he's doing.
Yeah.
Tim Scott, I think, is clearly in the sunken place and has no idea kind of what's going on around him, which is really weird and sad.
It is. I mean, watching people that should know better, but maybe they don't. It's man, I don't know what to do with that.
Which is worse to you? People who know what they're doing and do it anyway, or the people who are just completely
the people
lost?
Who know what they're doing. If you know better and you know what you're doing, well, then then you are deliberately spreading this cancer that is metastasized to the entire Republican Party and are part and parcel to trying to deconstruct democracy, all because you just want a seat at the table, all because you want a seat on Fox News, all because you want perceived power or notoriety or fame or fortune. And it's that is the most I can forgive an idiot who doesn't know any better. It's you don't know any better. You're just stupid. Okay, whatever. But if you know better, shame on you.
Did you see Trump coming? You having been a Republican and then switching over, did you see it coming?
Yes. I mean, if anything, it gets lost in the timeline, if you will. But when I left the Republican Party, which was in the spring of 2016, so at this point in time, Trump's still just a joke.
Yeah.
He's not going to be the nominee. This is well before the summer convention, well before he pretty much steamrolled. Everyone's talking about Jeb and Marco really at this point. And I got out and we're fucked. I
was on the Hillary Clinton campaign at that point, and I was ringing the alarm bells being yo, even if we win this election, she's screwed for re-election. And I remember there just being so much internal criticism around you're out of touch. No one would ever vote for Trump. And I was yo, the fire marshal in Denver had to shut down one of his rallies. And I was like, that's a problem.
Yep. It's like I saw, not that I necessarily knew he was going to win, because I would never like make that claim that early on. But I knew that he was a threat. I knew that he was more than a punchline. I knew that he was more than just, this is the greatest gift that we could ever hope for. Hillary's going to win it. And it's like, you don't get it. You think you're playing, presidential politics. He's over here playing WWE, UFC. Like, you don't get you're not in the same fight that he's in. And the one that he is in, he's going to win some of that. I knew it was over when Hillary selected Tim Kaine to be vice president. I'm like, we're fucked. Like,
he added nothing to the ticket. I know people thought because it was Virginia that somehow that was going to be the thing, but I'm just like, you just picked the one person who creates zero value, and I can't for the life of me understand why that decision was made, other than not wanting to be overshadowed by your under ticket. If anyone else in the Democratic Party had been picked as vice president, that might have been enough to win. I mean, it's like if it had been Bernie or Elizabeth Warren, even that would have been enough, because again, we had a problem ultimately with our base showing up to vote, because one, they thought that it was a foregone conclusion, there was no urgency. Two, they weren't thrilled with Hillary. Ideologically, they wanted someone more left. It's like, if we had just shorn up our own base, we would have won this thing and been spared all of this. I mean, it's one of the greatest blunders in history. And when you think about the havoc that has been reaped on our country globally because of Donald Trump, it's like Hillary Clinton's campaign bears some culpability in that, frankly. Sorry. Not you. You sounded the alarm. No, listen, where do you think her place in history is going to be, given, I mean, the good she's done, but, her campaign in many ways opened the door to Trump, and now the existential threat that
Hillary Clinton may have been the only politician in the Democratic Party who could have lost a general election to Donald Trump at that time.
Yeah.
Hillary Clinton is someone who will go down, obviously, as a historical figure, someone of great consequence politically, obviously. But when I look at the effect of if she had never existed politically, would we have been better off as a country? My answer is, yeah, absolutely we would have. Because Joe Biden may have been the nominee in 2016 instead of Hillary, which he would have won in a landslide, in my opinion, back then.
Which is also interesting, because if you think about it, he wanted to run and Obama told him not to. Had Obama not selected Merrick Garland as his Supreme Court nominee after Scalia died, and had he selected a black woman, which is what people wanted him to do, African Americans may have turned out more. Part of the reason, I mean, in many ways, Hillary lost that election. Trump didn't win it.
Oh, absolutely. That's absolutely the point. I mean, and again, it's like, we can go way back. It's like when I look at people who lost, who should have won. I mean, Al Gore is a classic example of someone who should have won. Outgoing popular president, economy is kicking ass, and you are the sitting vice president to that popular president, and you can't win. I mean, imagine how different the world would have looked when 9/11 happens, because it would have happened no matter what, in my opinion. And it's President Al Gore and not President George W. Bush.
Do you think we invade Iraq?
No, I don't think we do. It's like, I think all of that plays out very, very differently. And at the very least, the longevity of those conflicts would have been much shorter. Because you look at why we went into those situations, it was driven by Dick Cheney and all the things that happened after that, justified by John Ashcroft and Donald Rumsfeld. It's like the adults in the room, Condoleezza Rice and Colin Powell, were powerless. They got sidelined ultimately by Cheney and Rumsfeld. It's like, that doesn't happen in a Gore administration that way. There is no weapons of mass destruction situation, because our intelligence would have been listened to, which is it didn't exist. And we didn't have a vice president saying, we'll find it later, let's just go to war.
So I wonder then, what place do the Clintons play in the Democratic Party now? Because I got to admit, I cringe sometimes when I see Bill Clinton on stage
for
these fundraisers.
I
think he was a great president, but I think the time has passed in many ways. I think he brings more issues to the table than he does. No one's nostalgic for Bill Clinton.
We can't credibly talk about, empowering women,
Yeah.
and issues related to Me Too, and support Bill Clinton. We just can't be like that. Is Bill Clinton's a dog? I mean, come on, let's just call a spade a spade. This guy slept with anything and anyone that he could, which I personally don't give a shit about. But when you look at the power dynamics at play, when you look at the campaign that they ran to run a young woman's name into the fucking ground to survive politically, it's like you're no champion of women. You're no friend of women when you do that. Like, you did what Donald Trump is doing right now to Stormy Daniels, to Karen McDougal, to anybody. You're doing the same thing. And so just because you have a D next to you doesn't make it any better. In fact, again, to me, it almost makes it worse, because you do know better. You're supposed to be upholding a certain moral code and value, and you don't. And for decades now, Hillary has stood by her man and propped that up. And it's like, I'm sorry, but on what planet does that make you a role model to women?
Facts. Speaking the truth. Shout out to Monica Lewinsky. She has really, think about, she was like the original, like, social media person being bullied. Like, she was the first real target for that kind of like international bullying. And when we look back at like the clips of, the Jay Lenos of the world making fun of her, and like the comments that people make about her, that she's come out on the other side and is such like a role model and such a positive influence, and isn't just completely scarred and, a cautionary tale.
It's remarkable. She is
amazing.
the person that is the role model out of everybody here. It's like, yes, she made a mistake as a young woman, in her early 20s, with the most powerful person in the world.
Yeah.
Most
powerful, charming, charismatic.
It's like, on what planet is that her fault? On what planet is she the one that should bear that burden? And, and it really illustrated this baked in level of misogyny that we have in this world, when everyone started turning their fire against her, and grown ass men started, using her as cannon fodder. It's like, shame on all of them.
The older I get, the more I'm like, that was bullshit. Like,
bullshit.
He was a guy in his like 50s, and she's like 21. Like, that's some predatory shit.
Absolutely.
Why are Democrats not blowing out Trump?
Well, I think they still, to this day, haven't quite figured out that they're up against someone who masquerades as a WWE superstar, not an actual politician. I still think they've never quite adapted to that. I think that, frankly, the person that we have leading that charge, I'm not sure he's capable of that kind of a fight either. It's like, this is someone who has been in the United States government, serving in the Senate, now the then vice president, now the president, for like 4 or 5 decades. He does life the way that he does life, and that's not going to really change. I do think that, to the Democrats' defense, the media is just an abomination of both sidesisms and false equivalencies, and they trip over themselves trying to appear unbiased, when in actuality their efforts to do so creates that very biasness, in my opinion. They have not learned anything from 2016. They're supposed to be, the referees are supposed to be, the people who are calling the balls and strikes, and they suck at it. They're just horrible at it.
I watched one of the other networks the other day, once again, just leave a camera outside the courthouse like they did in 2016 with the Trump lectern. And it's like, you're just giving free ads for him to ramble, and there's no factual. And like, fine, you fact correct it after the fact, but like, the damage is already done. And there doesn't seem to be, let's just call it what it is. Like, networks, they want ratings. Ratings are how they get ad money. Like, this is a business. But like, at some point, Trump becomes a dictator who like federalizes all of the news. And so there is no news and there is no profits. Like, I mean,
that's the thing. It's like, and they all sit around and go, how did it come to this? It's like, what do you mean, how did it come? It came to this on your watch. You people can't even call him a liar because you think that's biased. It's like, no, he's a liar. Like, he lies all the time. Like,
I don't agree with Bill Maher on much, but this is a slow motion car crash.
Yes. Well, it's a coup in broad daylight, and I think what most people don't get, we don't talk about enough, is if Trump wins again, people need to understand January 6th, that's the starting point now. That's where we're beginning. That's not the end. That's the start. Like I said this years ago, January 6th is Act 1, folks. Yeah. And I know that Washington Post has that tagline, "Democracy dies in darkness." No, it doesn't. It dies in broad fucking daylight with you guys acting as stenographers for the authoritarians. Like that's how it dies.
Absolutely. I just, it's going to be interesting. I had Sean Spicer on a previous episode, and he tried to frame January 6th and, as a protest. And I think his exact words were that they were trying to put a pause on the government. And look, I like Sean as a person, but it makes me uncomfortable to see people try to like bend themselves in a way to defend things that just aren't true. And
right.
What's it like for you having to watch those kind of things happen?
It's maddening because it's like, no, it's not. It's like, again, this is the gaslighting here, making us doubt our own reality, our own eyes, if you will, and what we have seen. And again, the footage speaks for itself as to what that day actually was. And then for people in positions of power and influence to use their platform to so blatantly lie about something so serious is, this is how good, a democracy falls ultimately. It doesn't fall because someone hijacked it per se or took it. It falls because people who are a part of it, who are from within, just start completely abandoning truth and fact, and the erosion of truth and fact, and a set of basic fundamental guidelines that we can all agree on as Americans. When that starts going away, it's like, oh well, the experiment's over. Like there's nowhere left to go. We are literally just playing out an ending.
I mean, what happens if Trump really does win? I mean, if the election was today, I don't believe polls, but according to the polls, Trump would win. Like, what is that Project 2025 Trump world look like?
Oh, like we become under the control of an authoritarian regime. And
people say we're kidding and that like we're full of shit when we call Trump an authoritarian, or like that'll be the last election we have. Like, do you think that's hyperbolic, or do you think it's true?
No, it's not hyperbolic. Like, I mean, they have articulated a set of principles that's going to guide them, if you will. That speaks for itself. And really, what it is, it's going to be a war on anyone who isn't white. It's going to be a war on anyone who has a vagina. It's going to be a war on anyone who doesn't belong to a country club. And like that's what they have said. I mean, that's what their policies, that's what also that it leads to. And anyone thinks that we're exaggerating or being hyperbolic, it's like, okay, well, go ask any number of the women right now who are carrying a baby that they don't want for whatever reason, whose lives may be in danger because of that, and they can't get the medical care they need because of these people, these white Republicans who have told them, no, your body actually doesn't belong to you anymore. It belongs to the government, and we're going to tell you what you can and can't do with it.
I mean, for years, Republicans said that, they weren't going to overturn Roe. That wasn't their goal. That now we see Roe's overturned. They're like coming for IVF.
Yeah, fuck you, Susan Collins, by the way.
Hey, listen, Susan Collins, she doesn't really have an opinion on much. She just doesn't want to offend anyone. Just nice little Susan Collins.
Because Brett Kavanaugh promised her that this wouldn't happen. So naturally, she believed him.
And Alito, now we hear he's hanging flags upside down. Like, how can people have any faith that things are going to be fair, whether Republican or Democrat? Like, you got Republicans hearing from Trump that everything's going to be rigged and nothing's going to be fair. And then you have Alito hanging a flag upside down for Stop the Steal. And as a Democrat, I can't trust anything going before the court. Like, at what point does the system just break down?
Well, we're seeing, I mean, and again, this is the maddening thing. It's like when Donald Trump says, don't trust the election, it won't be fair. That is not the same thing as when Democrats say the Supreme Court is compromised. Because one is true, and there's facts and evidence to show that. It is a fact that members of the Supreme Court have been getting free trips, junkets, all kinds of financial things from rich Republican conservatives who have interest before the court. That is a fact. There is no evidence at all, and there never has been, that we have a voting irregularity problem in this country. There isn't. And in fact, the times where there are fraud, it's generally been committed by Republican operatives, North Carolina.
Hey.
And so it's like, what are you talking about here? Like, so when people say that, it's like, well, they're not the same thing because one, there's an exhaustive documented evidence of conflict of interest at the very least, not to mention the wife of one Supreme Court justices helped organize a coup against our country on January 6th, versus the Republicans who constantly say, well, we got to stop illegals from voting in our elections. What are you talking about? They aren't. You're offering solutions to a problem that actually doesn't exist to justify your racist policies and rhetoric.
But if you live in the right-wing echo chamber, I mean, that is all you're hearing. You're hearing the Fox News spin on all of it. And even after the lawsuits and after the settlement, you're still getting the same type of garbage disinformation that's riling up people and really making them afraid.
Yeah, I mean, it's a shame that we don't have anything in this country where we could actually do something about it because ultimately Fox News is committing libel against America. Mm-hmm. And, for all the things about free speech, it's like I wish we had a provision that said you can't lie to the American public when you know better. I mean, and
it's why Fox is listed as entertainment, not as news, for those very reasons.
Right. And I wish that we would force them to air a disclaimer before every show, every day that says, by their own admission, this is not a news program. This is an entertainment program.
Yeah, people try to compare Fox to MSNBC, and I have this argument all the time with Republicans. There is no functional equivalent to Fox News on the Democratic side. We have opinion on MSNBC. There is opinion on CNN, but it's not factually incorrect disinformation. And they actively peddle disinformation. Not everyone. There are anchors at Fox that I think, I respect. But I think the overall content at Fox is full of factual inaccuracies.
Yes, they lie constantly. They lie in what they say. They also lie by what they don't say, by the things that they omit from coverage. Like you said, like if you watch Fox every day, you don't know about some of these other things that are going on in our country because they don't cover it, because it doesn't fit their narrative. I have never known anyone at MSNBC, any host, anchor, producer, to lie, to go up there on air with the sole focus and mission of saying something that they knew was not true. I have never experienced that ever. Fox does it every single day.
How do Democrats compete with that then? Because we've got, 6 months or something like that until the election. And, this is the ball game. The stakes are winner takes all. And I don't feel the sense of urgency right now coming from Democratic voters. I think behind the scenes, the Biden campaign is really nervous. They're trying to play it cool, but there's a lot of people on the Hill, behind the scenes in the White House that are nervous. Like, what do you see? What do you think?
I think that everyone's nervous, and there's almost this feeling of like, well, whatever is going to happen is going to happen. We'll just have to play it out and see. And that's really what it feels like a lot of the time. So I think institutionally, organizationally, one of the great failings of Democrats, and I'll tell you, one thing that Republicans have done incredibly well and effectively is they have built up their own propaganda machine. When you look at, whether it's what Ben Shapiro has built or Charlie Kirk has built with Turning Point USA, you look at all the top podcasts in politics, and they're overwhelmingly right-leaning. Democrats, for reasons I'll never understand, seem to just rely on the MSNBCs, but like MSNBC's job is not to carry the water for the Democratic Party; it's to just report the news.
Exactly.
How the Democrats have not built their own media infrastructure and ecosystem to designed to target their audience, their base, and tell their version of what's going on. Not in the same way as Fox, not for the purpose of lying to them, but just like
promoting, giving a platform.
Right. It's like the news isn't going to do that for us. We have seen time and again, they would much rather, look at the disproportionate amount of stories they've written, for instance, about Joe Biden's age versus Donald Trump's insanity.
Or Republicans in Ohio who voted for Obama and then Trump twice.
It's like, they have no interest in telling the stories that I think should be told and voters should be made aware of. And they certainly don't have any desire to tell stories of accomplishment, because God forbid anyone does anything right in this world. So the Democrats, like for every major multi-million-dollar donor, it's like, well, how have you not built your own content factory by now? The fact that
there's
hasn't
Newsmax, One America, Daily
it
Blaze,
be hard.
all this stuff, and Dems.
And
Come on.
It infuriates me that has not been done, and the way that we look at how voters and anyone who lives in this country absorbs content, how we have not built things designed to reach them where they are, is an institutional systemic failure of the Democratic Party.
Having your perspective from being a Republican and then now being a Democrat, what advice would you give to Democrats in terms of taking on Trump, but just winning messaging in general?
Every single Monday night from 8 to 11 p.m. on the USA Network is something called WWE Monday Night Raw. Start watching it and adapt that to politics. The greatest form of creative long-form storytelling in all of entertainment is WWE. There's a reason why they have the 10th largest YouTube channel in the world, folks. 100 million plus subscribers. There's a reason why every Monday night and every Friday night, Raw and SmackDown is trending. The reason why they can sell out a football stadium 2 nights in a row in Philly for WrestleMania 40. There's a reason why The Rock, one of the most iconic entertainment figures in the world, keeps coming
smell
back
what he's
there.
cooking.
Exactly. It's like they understand the art of communication, of building characters, of storytelling, of talking. 3/4 of wrestling is actually them talking.
Yeah.
It's them taking a mic, cutting a promo, running down their opponent, which is exactly what Donald Trump does every single day.
It is, and it's so funny you say that. I was talking to my wife the other day, and what I don't understand is the only person who's been able to successfully take it to Trump is Barack Obama at that White House Correspondents' Center when he did what black people call jonesing, or the dozens. And so I don't understand why we don't have someone whose job it is every day to go out there and just go, look, you orange orangutan looking, 2-syllable talking, just go at him. And just every day, like Plies is starting to do it and be like the cool surrogate, but it's almost, we need a Biden translator. Like you can't talk to him like a regular person. This can't be like parliamentary procedure. Like you got to go there and take it to his ass.
Yeah, you do. I mean, I always said Ted Cruz could be president of the United States right now if during their debates back in 2016, if he had started the debate by going, before we begin, I need to talk to Donald Trump because he made some comments about my wife and my father. And let me tell you something. You better walk that back right now or I'm going to knock you the fuck out.
Yes.
He'd be
but they're all
president right
scared
now.
of him.
Yeah.
Ted Cruz still carries Trump's water. He still is like allows himself to be like prostrate and humiliated. Like, why do all these dudes cuck for Trump? Like, that's really what it is. I'm just going to go out and say it. Like, go ahead and say it. Why are Republicans just cucking for Trump?
Yeah, because they're a bunch of pussies, obviously. I mean, I don't know any other way to explain it. Like, because let me tell you something. If someone went and did that to my wife in public,
it's game over.
I would tell you, you better walk that back or I'm knocking you the fuck out. Like, that's just how
don't
that
let
should
the
go
law
now.
degree and, shirt full.
Yeah.
Like,
it's like, I don't understand why. And I think you're right. The most effective way to deal with Donald Trump is to humiliate him.
Yeah.
The way that Barack Obama did. Although it can make the point that White House Correspondents' Center is the worst thing that ever happened to humankind. Because of that dinner, he ran for president.
We've come full circle. We went from blaming Hillary at the beginning to now blaming Barack Obama for Donald Trump. What, in closing, are your predictions for the election? How's this going to play out?
I think we're going to win the House. I think we're going to lose the Senate, and I think that we're going to keep the White House. What
do you think things look like after? Like, does Trump concede? Does he accept the election?
No. It's going to be the brawl for all, like in the fall. Are you kidding me? It's going to be a fucking disaster. Because again, January 6th was just a dress rehearsal. You look at every single Republican right now who goes on national TV and gets asked, will you accept the result of the election? And they say, well, only if it's fair. Okay, well, that's telling us you're not going to accept the results of the election. We are going to have a constitutional crisis, come January. Like, there's just no way around that.
Hey, what do you say to America as we head into the next couple months? what's your hope? Like, what's your hope though? What do you, to voters that are trying to decide whether or not they're going to show up, to, you know, African-American voters who say,
I would say
Trump is just as, or Biden's just as bad.
Show up, if you don't show up and vote, then you don't get to complain about what happens to you next. Because I guarantee you, the next time that a police officer just shoots a black guy for the fuck of it, one side is okay with that, the other side isn't. You may not like Joe Biden, you may think he's not for you, but I'll tell you what, he's sure as fuck not against you, and the other guys are.
And there we go. Kurt, we're going to have you back before Election Day?
I hope so, if they let me back on.
Yeah, I know, right? After this, who knows? Kurt, as always, thank you. I love watching you. I love doing TV with you. It's always fun, and I really appreciate you.
All right, brother. We'll talk to you soon, man.
Thanks for being with me today. Share this episode with others. Like and review it. And please keep learning all you can so that you can make an informed voting decision this year. Come back next week for more Truth in Politics. I'm Michael Starr Hopkins, and this is It Matters.